Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you so much for coming out to join us for this panel on Country in the Spotlight, the impact of book fair spotlight programs. Just so you know, there will be a drinks reception here after the panel, so if you're patient, you might be rewarded. So to start us off, I would like to introduce the panelists. I'm Gabriella Pagefort. I'm the editorial director of Amazon Crossing, which is an imprint within Amazon Publishing focused on literature and translation. And to my right here, we have Antonia Lloyd-Jones.
Hello.
Antonia is a full-time translator of Polish literature and twice winner of the Found in Translation Award. I bet you guys already know her. She translates Polish authors, and therefore this week she's very much in the spotlight. To her right, you'll find John McGlynn, the co-founder of the Lontar Foundation, the world's foremost publisher of Indonesian literature and translation. He helped to coordinate the spotlight on Indonesia at the Frankfurt Book Fair in 2015. To John's right, we have Michele Hutchison, she was born in the UK and has lived in Amsterdam since 2004, and was working in publishing before becoming a full-time Dutch to English translator. And the Netherlands was in the spotlight at the Frankfurt Book Fair just last fall. And then all the way down the way there we have Izabella. Let me see if I can pronounce your last name and find you. Izabella Kaluta, is that right? Yes. Is an editor with many years of experience and deep knowledge of the Polish book market. And for 18 years, she's been working on various programs promoting literature within the country and Polish literature abroad. So some of you might wonder, what is a spotlight program or a guest of honor at a book fair? Each book fair here at the London Book Fair and at the Frankfurt Book Fair, there is a market focus in which a country is honored. Authors are brought, translators are participant, and panels like this one, as well as events within and around the fair and the city the fair is hosted in, really helps to invite readers and publishing professionals into a literature from one country in the world. So to get us started, maybe we can start with Isa talking a little bit about the Polish Spotlight and what that entails this week here in London.
I have better idea. Maybe Antonia will say something about the event which just ended with the most interesting and famous writer, Olga Tokarczuk, and something very interesting happened.
It's just that I've been coming to this book fair for, 16, 17 years. I've been working with Isa for about the same length of time. And really the fact that Poland is the market focus here and that it's getting this major spotlight is really down to her and to the last 18 years of her work. She's phenomenal, and none of it would be happening without her. And we were just saying how I have spent 16 years working on Olga Tokarczuk's work, banging on publishers' doors, telling people endlessly, this is one of the greatest writers in Europe. Please, please, will you publish this book? And getting nowhere. You know, it's like banging your head against a brick wall. Suddenly, she's author of the day. She's run off her feet. She's going to be on open book with Mariella blooming Frostrup tomorrow. And I'm thinking, can you hear me? Can you see me? What have I been saying all this time? So hooray for the market focus. I'm thrilled to bits because finally we can bring you one of the greatest authors you will ever read. It's that simple.
That's the value of a market focus.
Yes, but anecdote can show you the value of market focus. Usually people say, oh my gosh, it costs so much, how do you find the money for that? And they ask, is it worth? And this is, yes, it is. It is why we decided to organize something to bring Polish writers there, to spend a lot of money, of course, but I feel that for the first time from many years there is an interest from the British publishing industry, and I hope we will translation of Polish books here in Great Britain.
Yeah, it's always been easier for us in the States, in fact. And I've always found British publishers pretty reluctant and hard to convince. Suddenly, it was very odd. It was at last year's book fair. A few were approaching me with a view to this year, suddenly wanting to have something in Polish in time. And what's amazing is that we've got dribs and drabs. So with Olga Tokarczuk, for instance, who actually has 9 very good novels to her name, there's only 2 in English already, but I think there's already at least another 2 and probably another 5 altogether coming, which is great. And then there's another writer here called Jacek Dejnal, who's phenomenally good, and I've only ever managed to publish one of his in this country before, and suddenly now there's a second, suddenly we're now with a very strong publisher. Watch this space. So it really, really does open people's eyes to something that they've been kind of staring at and not seeing all this time.
John, you want to weigh in a little bit on the Indonesia perspective?
Yeah, I have to completely agree with my colleagues here. Indonesia, before the Frankfurt Book Fair, well, it still is fairly unknown, but in the 3 years leading up to the Frankfurt Book Fair, hundreds of press interviews, hundreds of media opportunities. Unfortunately, it's the country of honor, in this case Poland, was prepared with a person like Izabella. Indonesia was not prepared. It had no experience with a translation funding program, even though I told them 3 years ahead of time, you got to start now. Translation doesn't happen overnight. Instead, the funds didn't start coming down until 2015, and the fair is in October. So it was only because of some forward-looking publishers from abroad that we actually got quite a few books into other languages in time. I mean, in the end, we got 200 and some books translated into other languages, but most of them by Indonesian publishers. They could not get in time. They could not get the publishing deals in time. And so the focus country things are very important, but only with preparation ahead of time.
It's interesting you say that, because the Amazon crossing strategy has been that at the book fair where the guest is in the spotlight, we've focused primarily on announcing acquisitions from that country, because we have actually been able to meet people like yourself and find new networks that we hadn't actually met before as opportunities for new business. And thanks to the putting a country in the spotlight, there are a lot of people reaching out and a lot more visibility that we can find through the internet and that we can find through our existing contacts to discover great books, and to also then have other languages where we have readers and where we might not be able to reach into Indonesian or into Finnish, for example, with our own staff, that we then have more access and more understanding of what's being translated into German and what's available.
And that's especially true for exotic languages like Polish and Indonesian.
And I thought it was quite special that in the year after Indonesia was in the spotlight at Frankfurt, you coordinated quite a lot of activity in October. For example, Abida El-Khalikwi, one of the authors who we published for Amazon Crossing through that program, was there, and we had a conversation, and it was nice to see that the events were carrying forward.
Yeah, we're trying. It's an uphill battle getting the decision makers on board, and that's so important to get the government sector working with the private sector on this.
So we have, I think, in the audience quite a lot of translators, and I would love to talk a little bit about what the market focus does for translation.
Okay. Well, this particular book fair is unusual. Of all the book fairs in the world, the place where you are sitting now is extremely special, because only the London Book Fair has this dedicated translation thread. Thank God, we are so lucky, and it's all thanks to various people who are hovering around down there, like Mr. Daniel Hahn, etc. So we've always had, over the last few years, we've had a great build-up at this book fair of focus on translated work. And the beauty of a book fair like this for a translator is that suddenly your world is all in one place. So it's always the one time in the year when I'm completely frazzled, because all the Polish publishers I work with are in one place. All the British and American publishers I work with are in one place. And all the funding institutions I work with, such as the Book Institute that Isa runs, are in one place. And so I'm running around matching all the pieces up, fitting together publishers' books and I hope to result in some sort of a publication, introducing people. It's like a huge jigsaw. And I'm also learning about new books. It's very useful for a translator to be at a book fair like this, because you find out about all the publications, all the new things you never knew, and you make all those valuable contacts. But this year, it's particularly fraught for me, because in addition to all of that, there are all these writers of mine here, and suddenly it's all falling into place. It's like one of those puzzles where you spend ages trying to do it, and then suddenly these sort of dominoes all go in one great big loop, and boom.
Can I ask you something? Are those writers that are here, are they already translated into English, or are you trying to sell the rights here?
Not all of them are, and it's bitty. So several of the writers who are here, I've done maybe 1 book, 2 books, but there's other books that are waiting, and you still feel, even when you've got one of their books in English, you haven't really broken through yet. Say with Olga Tokarczuk, there are 2 books, one of which I translated it's 15 years ago or something, isn't it? And then the second one was 2008 or 9 or something. And then nothing since, except me and Jennifer Croft, her other translator, just trying to persuade somebody. It's interesting. Polish literature isn't very sort of predictable. So it's a country where the literature and the fiction isn't often very structured. There's a lot of experimentation with form. And I think sometimes the dear old, what the Poles call Anglo-Saxon world, is more used to beginning, middle, and an end type stories. So they're not quite prepared for books that depend much more on the style than on the actual rounded storytelling. So that's been a bit of a problem, that Polish writers don't always keep writing the same thing again and again and again. It's quite interesting that crime fiction, which is what Gabby has published from Poland so far, by the very nature of the genre, forces a structure on the literature. And I think that's had a bit of an influence in Poland, that they've started writing crime fiction in the modern sense, a bit like on the Scandinavian model. So it's brought in this very organized structure, some influence on the other more dreamlike, unstructured literature. And actually that's helpful for bringing it across into a market where we expect certain things.
Although I would point out that Zygmunt Miłoszewski definitely turns convention on its tail a little bit in Rage, the book that we published.
He's perverse, provocative, and painful. Are you here? No.
Sorry, Michele.
I was just going to say the focus, I'm here to talk about the Dutch in relation to Frankfurt, and the focus there was on promoting Dutch authors to a German public. So having them translated before the fair, they got over 300 titles translated into German, and had them ready, and had the authors tour the country, and had them appear at the fair for the German general public. And I would like to know how that relates at all to the Polish situation here, whether there's been anything like that, or is it still just at the right selling stage?
It's at the right selling stage. I mean, no one can afford to pay for all that. That books don't get translated until there is a contract in place and a publisher. Because really it doesn't make a whole lot of sense to pay a vast amount of money and do a whole lot of work to produce the books in English in the hope that So no, it doesn't.
So the issue is that there's a lack of funding from the Polish to give subsidies.
No, it's
for
that
translation.
it's that it doesn't make a great deal of sense. The Poles are actually very generous with they've been fantastic. I mean, I wouldn't be where I am today without the huge support of the poor old Polish taxpayer, and I take that responsibility seriously. But the thing is that until this year, their funding program has only accepted applications from foreign publishers who have already bought the rights, on the principle that then somebody's already made a commitment to that book. There's already some investment in it. It already has a market. It's been gone through the tough selection process of a book that the publisher can't necessarily read immediately. So it's passed a test.
That's the same though with the Dutch. They don't give funding until it's been contracted.
That's the same.
In Korea,
Yeah.
Same in Spain. Same.
Yeah.
I think the key difference is that the German publishers have an organized infrastructure and an explicit interest and plan to coordinate in advance of the book fair to identify and publish translated titles. And that's something that I think Amazon Crossing has really seen as an inspiration and a reason to try out, well, what can we do to participate in market-focused programs, and how can we evangelize books that we see as important through these existing infrastructures? The Book Expo America conference is the U.S. sort of book fair equivalent, and there is maybe the least emphasis on the country and the spotlight at that book fair. But I thought Poland really did an incredible job last year, bringing Zygmunt Miłaszewski and a number of other authors to Chicago, and not only participating in publishing industry-focused events, but similar to what's been done in Germany, touring around the area, pairing Polish authors with other authors from America who write in similar genres, and creating a fan base and an audience within reader circles for these books. And I think Indonesia did a really interesting job with that around the Frankfurt Book Fair as well, in terms of sort of creating big events.
It's true. I mean, when Indonesia was guest of honor at the Frankfurt Book Fair, we did over 400 events in Germany during the year in the country. But what was most important, and we didn't completely succeed there, is the local partners, especially the local publishers. Indonesia is, 10,000 miles away from Germany. To set up things in Germany was very difficult without those partner institutions. And if you have a publisher, especially a commercial publisher in place, whose interest it is in selling the books, it's all the better.
Our experience are the same, although we are neighbors of Germany. I started working with the Polish book title Books and Literature in the Frankfurt. In 2000, we were the guest of honor in 2000, and I think it can be interesting for you that we were in 1998, when we just started preparation for the guest of honor, being guest of honor in Frankfurt in 2000. There were no institution in Poland which could support grants, make promotion of literature, prepare materials, anything. And that guest of honor or market focus thing in 2000 in Frankfurt allow us to establish institutions. The most important one is our copyright Poland translation program, which is run by the Polish Book Institute from that moment. And at the beginning it was the program which supported only translations into German. And then it was in 2004 the Polish Book Institute was established, and I feel that all the time when you do market focus thing, you have to think about the public in the local market, but you have to be aware that also people involved in the market, your country market, publishing market, are very interested what you are doing. Now I feel that probably 10 or 11 newspapers and magazines, people who just write reports about market-focused things are with us here in London. Never before. They never wanted to come to the book fair to see what's going on there.
Yeah, I would like to just add that, as we all know, publishers have a herd mentality. And what's popular here, it tends to be purchased elsewhere. The country-focused programs, the spotlight programs, give the publishers a little bit more chance to take the risks that they otherwise might not.
Absolutely, and I think that the organization of identifying translators and identifying authors who are already sort of pre-established as success stories is something that we've benefited from as a publisher. Michele, I think that you've been working with a couple of authors from the Dutch who very much came with strong backing and were able to participate in the Frankfurt events. Mm-hmm. Is that anything as a translator that you see different from year to year that sort of shifts?
You obviously wouldn't normally have authors at the book fair, so just being there with them and going on stage with them, reading with them, and then the dinner we had afterwards was wonderful. Obviously, it's an opportunity that you wouldn't get otherwise.
It seems like a small thing, but when you think about having a translator who lives in one country and an editor who lives in another, and maybe a publicist who lives in New York, and the original publishers from the original country, and you put all those people at a dinner table, that's actually how this business works. So if we don't have opportunities to all join together, it's actually quite challenging to forge those connections. And then even more than that, it's challenging to feel like you can accurately represent someone. So if we have an author in the building, it makes it a little bit easier for us to meaningfully represent that author's work. We've got Zygmunt Miłaszewski in the building, everybody.
Mr. Painful and Provocative, there he is, being perverse.
So you acquired some Polish titles in advance of the fair this time?
Sorry?
The Amazon, whether they acquired Polish titles, him. And
we published Rage early in 2016, and it was coordinated around the Book Expo America focus on Poland, and we had some fantastic launch events. I actually think that the pairing of Zygmunt with crime writers writing in English was one of the most powerful events that I've borne witness to because of a market focus. And as a publisher, that's really inspiring because we can actually help to create those kinds of connections in the future. So that actually leads to something I wanted to ask all of you about. Thinking toward the future, John, you mentioned that Indonesia is thinking about trying to put themselves forward for a future Spotlight program here in London. What does that planning process look like, and how far in advance do organizers get started?
Well, ideally, you have at least 3 years in advance because there's always going to be challenges, but in the ideal situation, yes, 3 years in advance in order to get just the plan. And the thing is, most venues in London will be booked at least a year in advance. And they want the chance to curate the events. Publishers want the same kind of opportunity, 18 months to 2 years in advance. So if you want a successful program, it's forward planning. And a lot of money. You have to remember that this is business too. I mean, yes, this is cultural diplomacy, but if there's not at the end of the day, if there's not a return on the money, the government doesn't really want to go forward. I mean, one thing about the Guest of Honor program for Indonesia, it saw the number of visa applications rise 300%. The government really liked that.
I know how much it cost to do the Dutch Guest of Honor. It was 5 million euros. I asked them, they told me.
Yeah. Indonesia was $7-8 million.
Really more? Gosh.
How much was the Polish?
I don't remember. I think it was in 2000, so I don't remember. We pay everything in zlotys.
You might not make that back
sorry,
just
I
on
don't
the
remember,
books.
but for sure it was a lot of money, and no, I even can't imagine the numbers.
No, but you can't quantify those things at the end of the day either. I mean, Indonesia, all of us, I mean, it got thousands of articles, positive articles. in the mass media.
So it's also... Sorry.
Okay, I wanted to ask to add that the good thing with the country of honor or market focus thing is that you can apply for a money not only from your Ministry of Culture but also for the Foreign Affairs Department, and it is like a accumulation of of money you can spend on the program, and it is nice. It helps a lot. Yeah.
So this preparation for a country being in the spotlight also includes a lot of sample translations and a lot of spreading around of authors' work. I wonder if anyone can talk about how translators might get involved.
Well, with this market focus for Poland, the British Council, of course, is very heavily the partner of the Book Institute, and the London Book Fair also. Those organisations have done the most massive amount of work for months and months and months. And there are tireless people at the British Council and the LBF who really we owe a great deal to. And they organised early on a so-called steering committee. It's one of those phrases that's sort of meaningless, but a group of people who might be able to contribute something. And we were put together in a small room now and then. And they just let us just riff and say what was interesting and throw up ideas. And then they kind of picked up on some ideas, didn't pick up on others. And it's very nice because it's... if they're coming at it from an angle where they don't actually know anything, and next year it's going to be the Baltics, say, and they don't know anything about those countries, it's pretty difficult to make yourself an expert to that extent in a very short space of time. So it's a nice thing to just get a pool of people who know about the thing and then just take a little bit from each person. So it's not just one or two people dictating how it should be. It's a mixture and people with different interests and different imaginations. And I think that's very nice, the way it's worked out. They've also been very sensitive to some, for instance, with us translators here, there's a whole range of us, from people like me who are professional translators through to people who are emerging translators. And instead of just using the frightfully well-placed people, they've given everyone a good chance, which I think is a very good and healthy thing to do, to be spreading things across the age groups and bringing in people from different angles. So I think we owe them a great deal too. And so a lot of us have put work in to different degrees and in different ways. And I mean, it's really been a very, very nice pooling of Polish, British, and whatever you call a Polish-British person. I can see one over there and one over there. Our adopted British Poles.
I would like to add to that unlike a literary festival, those are often very strictly curated and very much reflect the taste of the curator, the spotlight programs have to be somewhat nationalistic, have to reflect the nation that is being the spotlight. Yeah. And so Indonesia, with 250 million people, 760 languages, thousands of different ethnic groups, choosing authors, choosing who comes.
Choosing authors is always the theme.
Authors they're like herding kittens, as we know. I was forced to really make this grid and put everything down from gender to religion to ethnic group to age I never published it, but I needed to be able to justify every author. We couldn't have 60% Javanese and,
How did you choose the Polish writers? Because I'm really interested to know how. There must be pretty difficult kind of horse trading going on. How long did you have to sit in the home for the bewildered over that one?
I'm not sure if I can speak in public about
it's classified information.
Yes,
One day you'll write your
maybe,
book.
Yes.
No, but the authors don't want to realize that we have to make those awful decisions too. It's not always about talent. And it's also about, can this author present herself well? Can she speak in English?
For the Dutch, it was quite simple. The authors who went had to have been published in German in the year up to the book fair. But the complication was that the Netherlands and Flanders were guests of honour together. So you actually had two countries presenting themselves as one linguistic area, so a shared language, but actually dissimilar cultures in some ways, similar and dissimilar. They bridged that by calling the whole programme This Is What We Share, and thinking about what Flanders, the Netherlands and Germany share, which was the North Sea, and that was the kind of theme for it.
Those things can be very difficult. For instance, Sean, who's not here at the moment, who's one of the Polish translators, has been organising a festival of newly translated literature in New York, and is caught in a terrible war between the Spanish and Catalan delegations, and there's kind of just bombs going off. It's just terrible. It's not all about cultural diplomacy of the positive kind. You can start wars through book fairs.
There was a lot of interesting warfare in Indonesia over this.
Well, this is exactly what I said before. The country which is in the spotlight is really interested what will be presented, and this is somehow. This is the moment when you can judge your position as a writer, not only in your national market, but also internationally. So it can cause a lot of strange situations.
Yeah.
That global platform is hard to come by. Authors like to use it when they get it.
And it's often surprising who becomes the stars of the show, though. I had my top writers, and then, that one, got the publishing deal. That one did not.
That's the fun of it, maybe. Does anyone have anything to add?
I think, authors who have good English are obviously going to be important here, or good German in Germany. It's quite a necessity if they're going to promote themselves.
I think that the process of constructing writers' delegation was really nice in the case of Market Focus here, because we do something like a scoping visit for British Council people and the London Book Fair team, and we try to present them the variety of Polish market. Then they got the steering committee constructed from people who are here, connected to the Polish literature somehow, and it is like a mixture of different point of views, which allow proper construction of this group of people who during this week are representative of Polish literature.
Does anyone in the crowd have any questions?
I want to ask Isa if she'll tell us a bit about her experience of making Polish literature exist in China from scratch, which is quite an achievement, really.
I'm not sure if I can say Polish literature.
Wow.
Polish books.
Contemporary Polish literature.
No, Polish books, because as you probably know, the Chinese book market is very specific, and now there is a boom for children's literature, which is somehow we as Poles has a long tradition of Polish illustration and books for children, and this is like our speciality. So a few years ago, it's true. A few years ago, when I was for the first time in China for Beijing International Book Fair, I realized that there are per year 2 or 1.5 Polish titles translated by Chinese academics, and these books were usually Polish classics. So it was like nobody really noticed that Polish books were translated and published in China. And when I was standing, my stand was very small, but I have some Polish book titles with me, and I realized that nobody understands that even the title. And Olga Tokarczuk or Andrzej Stasiuk and other Polish names, they even couldn't read them. So I decided to I thought maybe next year I should bring something which will be more appealing, and it was a decision that we should bring some more children's book, and when we had these children's books on the display next year, I got more interesting conversations with Chinese publishers, and then we just realized that there are no translators because they want to translate classics for university publishing houses, not children's, for commercial big Chinese really influential publishers. So we had to invent the program to create new translators, and of course translating children's literature can be very demanding, but can be also more simple for people who just start. And with the help from the Beijing University for Foreign Studies, and where we have luckily Polish department, we did some kind of workshops for young translators, and it was the moment that we found new people who can work for the Polish books.
No, I would like to add to that, because leading up to the Frankfurt Book Fair, we were in a situation where the German publishers were not picking up enough titles, and I realized that one of the requirements to go even be invited abroad was to have a book in translation already. And I put together a list of 25 emerging authors with the help of some stellar people, but we've found enough German translators. We were told we would never find enough translators. So there were only 2 known translators from Indonesian to German. But we got 15, during the year and a half leading up, we got 15 people who, by all accounts, produced really good translations. So we got 15 people.
So it seems if emerging translators are interested in getting ahead of the market focus game, that they should focus in on the literature institutes within the countries of the languages
Absolutely.
they translate from.
Yeah.
You have a question to the crowd?
Question is really, I realize that most or many countries are in a position of putting themselves forward, but what about those countries where it's really impossible to, for a range of usually political reasons, to work with? I mean, there couldn't be really a focus on Iran, for instance. there couldn't be a focus on a number of other countries. Do you think there's a way of having a different spotlight as well as by country or as well as even by language within the book fair that could negotiate some of those difficulties? Because there usually are countries where anyway the literatures are less translated into English and are very much less known, and therefore it's almost an extra burden that they're less even known.
I can say one thing about that, Stephen, which is because I'm one of the people who helps organise this literary translation centre, the panels. And there's a panel tomorrow that I've organised which is with translators who work with writers who are in prison. And I put together a group of people to speak on this panel. There's Arun Avasina, who translates Bengali and Indian writers. There's Jethro Sutar, who translates Juan Thomas Havila Laurel, who's an Equatorial Guinean writer. Then Nikki Harman, who translates Chinese writers. And then Paul Starkey, who translates Middle Eastern and Arabic writers. And they're being presented by Ellen Elias Burthach, who translates former Yugoslavian. And I did this deliberately because I thought it would be important to have, it's quite a different thing to translate for somebody who's sitting in a prison. How do you do that? And I thought it would put the spotlight on those places that don't get this sort of star treatment. And a very interesting thing, when I was researching who to have and how to balance it, I found out that the wonderful Ledbury Festival, which I'm sure you know, Chloe Garner, who runs Ledbury, she had a focus last year at Ledbury on poets who are in prison or at risk. And I'm sure you were involved in that. But I thought, wow, that we should be doing that much more. There should be more and more and more of that. So that's my little contribution to that. But you're right, yeah, it would be good to find special ways. I mean, we should be talking to the British Council, shouldn't we? I think it's a very good idea.
Mm-hmm. One of Indonesia's most famous authors, Pramudia Anandathur, was in prison. Well, he was in prison 3 times in his life, but the last time was for almost 19 years. And he attributes his survival to translation. Yeah. He said if his books had not been translated, he would have been lost on this island where so many of his colleagues were murdered and lost their lives. So it can help.
We should be doing it.
Hi, as somebody who's new to the literary translation world, I'm just wondering to what extent, if there isn't available a translator or multiple translators to do translations between uncommon languages or minority languages, I'm wondering to what extent it exists or it's accepted within the literary translation world to do translations, for example, from, I don't know, Polish to French and then into English, something like that.
Everybody will have something to say on this question, and it's so important because without a bridging language, you would not get literatures translated into almost any language. I mean, Eka Kurniawan, one of Indonesia's most popular authors now, has 38 book deals, but only because he has the English translation, which people are using. I mean, as a translator myself, I always want somebody to check that, though. I mean, like the Japanese are very good. They give, they actually give graded translations, and that this you can translate from English from. They do that for their books. But yes, it's so important but unfortunately the publishers are, they say they're against it, and ideally yes, you should translate directly from Indonesian into Persian, but there's not enough translators.
It's a practical issue. I mean, if it's a choice between having a translation into Chinese from the English or not having one, what do you do? Holland was a guest at Beijing Book Fair as well and had a similar experience. They also liked picture books. Yes. But everything that was in English was were the things they avidly picked up. So which classics are already in English, and then they would do those. And the Literary Foundation made an exception in the subsidy, in the funding, because usually they would only subsidise translations directly from the Dutch, but in some cases where there's absolutely no other way, then they would go through English.
Yeah. But you can use that also to train the body of translators. By getting more books into Chinese from the Dutch, you get more people interested in Dutch literature, maybe studying Dutch culture and language.
It certainly happens with Polish, doesn't it? That there's relay translation, as we call it. You said something that, everyone's got little words that make them go funny. Mine is minority language when talking about Polish. From where I sit, Polish ain't no minority language. But I like what you said. Exotic, please. Much rather be exotic than minor. But I know that some of my translations have appeared in Japanese, which. I'm very proud of that. Just speaking as a translator, you often don't know it's happening, and there ought to be something in your contract, but in effect,
I know.
you don't know.
Publishers do lie, because I know some of my translations have been used for translations in other languages.
But actually, I'm thrilled to bits. Good. I'm glad if my translation helps
But you never
and travels
got paid,
further.
did you?
Well, you can't have everything in this life. Money's nice, but it's not everything. But it's very interesting with Polish because there are lots of very famous Polish books that only exist in English via French or whatever. But because things have been growing with Polish literature going into English more, some of them are being redone directly into English. So there's sort of healthy things happening. And I think if that bridge helps to get things out there, great. That's wonderful.
It's also, in terms of acquisition, it's very important for the editors to read, say, Indonesian books in a language they speak. Mm-hmm. Otherwise, even if they do get it translated from the Indonesian, they wouldn't be able to understand it in the first place.
Yeah, very often, of course, sales happen that way. I had it yesterday. A book I just translated into English has just been sold into French on the basis of my translation. We're not going to use it to translate, obviously, but one language sells another. And all the time, that happens all the time.
Yeah, completely all the time. I mean, I've spent 30 years overseeing the translation of Indonesian literature, and nobody ever comes to pay, my foundation, the Germans, the French, they go back to the original publisher, of course.
There's one thing I wanted to say about the book fair market focus, which is that, suddenly I feel like about a year and a half ago I was sitting thinking, oh my God, I'm trying to get all these books, get interested in these books. And I was sitting blubbing into my tea thinking that I'm never going to get any work ever again. But translating books is a bit like buses. You wait for ages and then they all come along at once. And this year I feel like they've all crashed into the back of each other. But I'm wondering, what I'm curious to see is if it'll last. Maybe next year I'll be back twiddling my thumbs wondering what to do. I don't know if it lasts.
We don't know. We have a hope that the market focus effect will last. But anyway, the market focus program is constructed as a 3 years program. So the after market focus year is the summing up year. So we will see.
No, but usually one market focus leads to another. I mean, after Indonesia became guest of honor at the Frankfurt Book Fair, it received multiple invitations to become guest of honor. The Chinese have a policy of being guest of honor or spotlight country at least 2 festivals every year.
Wow.
And the government commits 2 festivals every year. Oh, I see. Any other questions? Yeah, you didn't want to yell.
Well, thank you very much. It looks like our drinks are getting set up over to the right there. I hope you can join us.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.